Good evening. I'm Haylee Ficuciello, Senior Correspondent for Englebrook Independent News. Welcome to this edition of our Federal Crime Report, where we highlight significant criminal prosecutions, sentencings, convictions, and major federal law enforcement action across the western United States during the opening week of July of 2026. Before we begin, an important legal reminder. Any criminal complaint, indictment, or pending federal prosecutions discussed in this report contain allegations only. Every defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty beyond reasonable doubt in the court of law. Cases involving guilty pleas, jury verdicts, or sentencings have reached those respective stages of the judicial process, but sentencing or appellate proceedings may still remain. Now, here's this week's Federal Crime Report. We begin tonight in Washington. Federal prosecutors in the Western District of Washington announced several major developments involving financial fraud, human trafficking, and bank theft. A Federal Way woman pled guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud and bank fraud after admitting she falsely presented herself as an investment advisor serving members of Korean community. Prosecutors say at least 28 victims entrusted her with more than $3 million, much of the retirement savings. According to the court records, the defendant admitted to much of the money had been diverted to personal expenses, including a gambling addiction. Sentencing is scheduled for September. In another case, a Seattle man received 20 years in federal prison sentence after being convicted on sex trafficking a minor and an adult woman, transporting victims for prostitution, and unlawfully possessing a firearm. Federal prosecutors said the investigation documented threats, violence, coercion, and exploitation spanning multiple years. Meanwhile, a Woodinville man has been indicted on 30 federal counts alleged theft from financial institutions where he worked and laundered approximately $440,000 throughout personal bank accounts. Prosecutors allege the theft occurred while employed at two separate financial institutions. Because of this matter remains pending, those allegations have not been proven in court, and the defendant is presumed innocent unless proven guilty in the court of law. Next, we move to Oregon. Federal authorities in Oregon announced several significant cases involving organized burglary rings, drug trafficking, and international cybercrimes. 4 Colombian nationals were sentenced to federal prison for participating in a multi-state burglary conspiracy targeting Asian American business owners throughout Oregon and Washington. Prosecutors said the group used surveillance technologies, signal jamming equipment, and coordinated communication before breaking into homes and stealing cash, jewelry, travel documents, and other valuables. Following their federal sentence, each defendant also received state prison terms connected to the burglaries. In Portland, a Mexican national has been sentenced to 14 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to participating in a methamphetamine trafficking conspiracy linked to drug debt that resulted in homicide. Prosecutors said the defendant was later extradited from Canada after fleeing the United States. Federal prosecutors also announced that an Armenian national extradited from the Ukraine pled guilty to conspiracy and computer fraud for his role in Raku ransomware attack that targeted business throughout the United States. Investigators said the conspiracy extorted millions of dollars in cyber currency from victims, including an Oregon technology company. Continuing to Idaho, a Napa man sentenced to 30 years in federal prison after being convicted of producing child sexual abuse material involving a young child. The investigation began after the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children forwarded a cyber tip to the Idaho Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. Federal prosecutors also announced that Fort Hall woman received an 80-month prison sentence after pleading guilty to conspiring to distribute methamphetamine and fentanyl. Authorities said the investigation resulted in the seizure of significant quantities of fentanyl intended for distribution throughout the southern East Idaho. Now, we head to Nevada. In Las Vegas, a federal jury convicted 3 men of participating in conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine and fentanyl. Prosecutors said the operation supplied multiple controlled substances throughout Las Vegas area. Sentencing is scheduled for October. Federal prosecutors also announced charges against 2 Las Vegas men accused of committing an armed carjacking using firearms. Those charges remain pending, and both defendants are presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in the court of law. In a separate immigration case, a Mexican national has been sentenced to more than 1 year in federal prison after pleading guilty to illegally re-entering the United States following multiple prior removals. According to the court records, This marked his third federal conviction for unlawful re-entry. Next, we move to California. The Southern District of California announced several notable criminal and civil enforcement actions. A former San Diego County Sheriff's deputy was sentenced to 57 months in federal prison after a jury convicted him of violating a pretrial detainee's civil rights through excessive force and later falsified records to conceal the incident. The victim suffered serious spinal injuries. Federal prosecutors also unsealed an indictment charging an alleged senior leader of a violent faction of the Sinaloa cartel with narcoterrorism, material support of terrorism, and large-scale drug trafficking offenses involving fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine. Because this prosecution is in an earlier stage, the indictment contains allegations only, and the defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. Separately, the Department of Justice filed a False Claim Act complaint against the founder of several California cannabis companies, alleging she improperly obtained approximately $1.4 million in federally guaranteed pandemic relief loans by falsifying certified eligibility under federal law. That matter is a civil enforcement action and remains pending. Continuing into Utah, federal prosecutors in Utah secure a jury conviction against a Chicago man charged with possessing approximately 25 pounds of cocaine and carrying a firearm during a drug trafficking offense following a traffic stop in southern Utah. In another case, a Texas man has been sentenced to 57 months in federal prison after admitting his role in an attempted ATM robbery in Utah and a successful ATM robbery in Ohio using a similar method. Authorities say more than $200,000 was stolen in the Ohio robbery. Now we move to Arizona. The District of Arizona reports filing immigration-related criminal charges against 325 individuals during 1 week of enforcement operations between June 27th and July 2nd. The filing includes illegal re-entry cases, unlawful entry offenses, human smuggling prosecutions, and assault on a Border Patrol agent. Federal prosecutors also highlight the sentence of a Parker, Arizona man to 28 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to second-degree murder in connection with the fatal shooting of a former inmate partner in the Colorado River Indian Tribes Reservation. Next, we continue into New Mexico. Federal prosecutors announced that La Croix's teenager was sentenced to 9 years in federal prison for shooting an 18-year-old victim during a robbery, leaving the victim permanently paralyzed. In a separate case, a La Croix man has been charged with multiple child exploitation offenses after investigators allege discovering evidence during an extensive search warrant connected to an unrelated federal investigation. Those criminal charges remain pending, and the defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty beyond reasonable doubt. Authorities also announced the sentencing of Zuni Pablo man to 78 months in federal prison after pleading guilty to voluntarily manslaughter in a fatal shooting. From there, we head north to Alaska. Federal prosecutors in Alaska announced the arrest of a Solona man on charges alleging possessing and receipt of child sexual abuse material. According to charges documents, investigators executed a federal search warrant after tracing online financial transactions allegedly linked to known source of illegal material. The defendant has made his initial appearance in federal court. These are criminal allegations only, and he is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. Finally, we conclude in Hawaii. In Honolulu, a California resident has been sentenced to more than 7 years in federal prison for conspiring to distribute methamphetamine and fentanyl into Hawaii as a part of Homeland Security Task Force investigation. According to federal prosecutors, the conspiracy involved more than 34 pounds of methamphetamine, over 11 pounds of fentanyl, and fentanyl-laced pills, undercover drug purchase exceeding $100,000, and money laundering operations involving shell companies that moved millions of dollars throughout multiple bank accounts. Those are some of the most significant federal criminal cases announced across the western United States during the opening week of July of 2026. As always, Englebrook Independent News will continue following these investigations and prosecutions as they move through federal court system, bringing you verified facts, official court filing, and updates as they become available. For continued coverage on federal law enforcement, public safety, and the United States justice system, stay with Englebrook Independent News. I'm Haylee Ficuciello. Thank you for joining us tonight and have a great evening.